The Toronto Analytics Party presents How Major Junior Hockey Performance Predicts Future NHL Success. A showcase of statistical insight linked to a potential 25% or more improvement in the draft selection process. Now, this is a precursor to an advanced analytics model that will prioritize draft candidates. Quick background. By major junior, we mean hockey leagues comprised of amateur hockey players aged 16 to 19. The NHL Entry Draft is an annual meeting in which every franchise of the National Hockey League systematically selects the rights to available amateur ice hockey players. The NHL Entry Draft is held once every year, and during the draft, teams take turns selecting amateur players from junior, collegiate, and European leagues. The challenge: only 25% of skaters selected in the NHL Draft go on to play 100 games or more in the NHL. If you take a look here, this is the proportion of players that go on to play 100 games or more, and this is the order in which the players were selected. Now we're looking at the years 2000 to 2009. So it's quite obvious that we see a plummeting success rate all the way down to draft selection around 40, then a quick decline to a point to around selection 100, and then it's almost pretty much random as we move along here. Not much difference in success rates. We've discovered a lot of different metrics that we know we can improve those rates. Here's an easy example of one too. Now, there are many different leagues that an amateur player can be selected from. The Ontario Hockey League has the highest proportion of players that go on. At 24% of all NHL players come from the Ontario Hockey League, and they have the highest success rates by any league in terms of the success of a player selected there. So let's take a quick look at that, and just to break this down quickly, 85% of skaters selected in the OHL go on to play 100 games or more in the NHL, and 72% of players selected from outside the Ontario Hockey League, at least if they're selected in the first round. So right away we see a 13-point improvement if they've been selected from the Ontario Hockey League. By round two, we're seeing almost 2 times the success rate if they're selected from the OHL, and those figures continue to stay to an advantage for the Ontario Hockey League through every round, save round number 7. Now, we're going to break down a little bit more about the performance metrics in the Ontario Hockey League and how they're linked to success. But I really wanted to before we do all that, I have to set up some of the real gotchas when you go through the data that if you don't account for them, you'll have it'll be very hard to be successful and link major junior statistics to future success. So here's an example of just 2 players, but it sums up a lot of the challenges. Selected from the 2007 and 2008 season. Player A, center, left wing, depends on which data set you want to take a look at. Player B, also center. Goals, player A 7, player B 43. 7 assists to 81. 14 points to 124. The plus minus of player A is minus 14, meaning for every goal that is scored while player A's line is out, the opponents have scored 2 times. Player B is positive. Both teams go on to the playoffs. Player A's team only made it 4 games. Player A had no points, minus 3. Player B has 36 points in the playoffs, almost 2 points a game. His team wins the championship. He's the MVP of the playoffs. What a hero. Draft round. Player A's points in context. There is many players in the Ontario Hockey League alone that had much better offensive performance measures. And if we take a look at player B's performance in context now, to take it in a much broader context, of 11,000 skaters in the regular season from 1998 to 2015, player B's points are in the top 15 of all time from that era. So, hey, if there's a Hall of Fame for the Ontario Hockey League, player B is going to be in it. At least ought to be. Draft round. Player A is selected. At the 6th round, player B, also the 6th round. Player A, does he go on to play any games in the NHL? Yes, 210 and counting. Player B, 0. What is going on here, folks? Player A revealed is Zach Ronaldo. Clearly, as you can see here, Zach's contributions are not necessarily putting basically with a stick in his hands. Player B is a player called Justin Azevedo. So I have to solve for what's going on here if any of the stats are to make sense. So I'll call it the Zach Ronaldo effect. So I have to be able to remove enforcers. So if there's a high ratio of penalties to points, we're removing those players from analysis. Not to say these players don't contribute, but you wouldn't use these models in analysis we use to identify them. The other one is Justin Azevedo. How do we understand this? Well, Justin was actually 19 years old when he was playing that year, meaning he was passed over in the earlier draft. And, at the age of 19, you are literally a man playing against boys. So you have a 19-year-old playing against 16 and 17-year-olds. So we are able to factor in now your age at the time of the draft. Now, you're all over 18, or at least before the draft date, your eligibility date, but we need to factor in some more nuance in there. So at any rate, let's get into it. Even to break down by a simple slice, we've already saw that the Ontario Hockey League brings us a whole bunch of points in terms of your chances of being successful. If we break it down more by forward versus defense, we can see that if we select a forward in the first round, we have a 94% chance of that player going on to play 100 games, which is fantastic. 74% for defense. So we automatically lose 20 points if we select a defenseman over a forward. This is even more extreme when we look into the second round, where we have almost 2 times the success rate of selecting a forward over defense. We're not seeing those same differences from round 3 on through 7. So again, right out of the gate, quick little shortcuts to improve draft selection probability rates, OHL, and picking forwards, at least in the first 2 rounds. Now, having said that, there's so many different ways to take a look at defense and getting those success rates up. Here's an example. If we take a look at goals by position, so this is to take a look at center, and we have our buckets of different goal categories here. If a center has scored 0 to 10 goals, we see it has that player has a very low chance of being successful in the NHL, and a nice jump once they get 11 or more. But you'll notice not a much difference between whether they scored between 11 and 20 or even 30 or more goals. Not that much of a shift going on here. For defense, we see a big difference between whether the player scored 0 to 10 or 11 or more goals. In fact, if the defenseman scored 11 or more goals, they're having a higher success rate than centermen who have scored 30 or more goals in the OHL. Very impressive. And for wingers, we see a simple linear relationship. The more goals that they have scored, the higher success rates they have in the NHL. Shorthanded goals. This is an impressive metric when we take a look at how is it linked to the chance of future success. Shorthanded goals would be even in the regular season or in the playoffs of that same season, and even looked at the season previous. So if a player had scored just 1 shorthanded goal, we see 2 times the success rate of players that did not score a shorthanded goal. Very impressive metric to be linked to success. And I want to break down the shorthand goals even a little bit more, even by round. This is forwards and defense, by the way. So if you look at the first round, players that have scored at least 1 shorthanded goal, 96% of them are going on to have a successful NHL career versus 65% of players that had not scored it. So now we're at a 30-point spread here, even in the first round. This is the line for non-OHL players selected. Okay, so we see another great way to improve our success rates. The second round is a really marked example. I just can't wait to show you. So these players with 1 or more shorthanded goals have a 71% chance of success, or 71% of them will go on to have a successful career, I should say, versus only 28% of players who did not score a shorthanded goal. So we're almost in the area of 3 times the success rate. Now here's another part. Take a look. 71% success rate from the second round versus 65% for people that did not score, or about the same for non-OHL leagues, meaning a second round draft choice under those conditions had the same level of success as a first round selection. So very impressive. And if we move on throughout the rounds 3 and 4 to 7, we see the same very interesting phenomenon taking place here, where we have, just take a look here, 41% of the players with 1 or more that are selected in the third round are being successful, and 25% in rounds 4 to 7, which is now rivaling a second round selection from all other leagues. So again, there are lots of these little hidden data nuggets in there that really link to a real chance to be much more successful in late rounds if we know how to put it all together. Okay, let's move on quickly here. So, there's a much longer presentation. We can go through this in many more metrics in a lot more depth. But to show quickly, if we break different performance metrics down by position, we see all sorts of interesting things. So, for instance, plus minus, we see it being very relevant for center, very relevant for defense, not so much for wing, being but one example. Of course, the better your plus minus, the better your odds. Now, physical attributes such as height, we have players that are 6'1" or under, or 6'2" or over, and we see for center, wing, and defense, the players that were 6'1" or under are having higher success rates than the taller players. Impressive, and maybe somewhat counterintuitive. Same conditions for height. So we have players that are under 200 pounds versus over 200 pounds. If in the case of a center, we have 2 times the success rate if the player was under 200 pounds versus 200 pounds. And we see the same condition being true for wingers, 2 times the success rate, not for defense. So we see this a lot. We see one metric being really, really powerful for one position, but completely, we're not seeing any link to a different position on the ice. So we really have to break it down by position and then compare to the metrics that way. Okay, so what did we cover? There's a lot more that we could go over. In this one, we talked about forwards, defense, goals, shorthanded goals, plus minus, height and weight. We have a much, much longer version. Would love to talk more about all of these metrics. Right, but we also want to, we could show you more about how our statistical model, which we've codenamed CBAS, special points for those of you who know why we would do that, and all the factors and how it prioritizes all these things and all these metrics and many, many more. Okay, so what we do is recap all the things you saw there, and we'll go a lot more detail. And there are some other metrics that we didn't have time to cover. So goals, defense, we'll take a deeper look at that, the plus minus in the context of the team. So would you have a really good team with a negative player or a negative team with a positive player? Offensive style, weight and height put together, penalties, the team playoff success, the age at the time of the draft, the OHL tenure, and year-over-year progress. A lot of the players are playing 2 or more years in the OHL. Let's take a look at what those are. So lots of different things that we can talk about. Love to do that. So this is coming to you from the Toronto Analytics Party. Our model is inexpensive, it's simple and easy to use, and it's designed to support very quick decision making. So love to talk to you more about that. Okay, thank you very much for your time.